So today we're actually talking about soy and breast cancer, and does it actually increase your risk for breast cancer? And 3 questions or things that you may have heard about that are actually not really correct. We're going to be deep diving into the research a little bit here, but before we start, I just wanted to say that as a board certified naturopathic doctor here in Ontario, I have worked with many women who have had breast cancer. This question was one of the most common questions I would get asked because of the fact that a lot of times they were told by either their doctors or maybe somebody else that they should be avoiding soy. Now, this was something that had started many years ago. We know that the Canadian Cancer Society, American Cancer Society, and other associations have actually all lined up with the same type of advice for breast cancer survivors as well in terms of soy products. The recommendations now is completely different than what it used to be many, many years ago. Now, first of all, why is it soy that's actually linked with this potential risk with breast cancers? The fear is really around the phytoestrogens that we're seeing in something like soy. Now, phytoestrogens are actually compounds that look like estrogens in plants themselves. While soy is actually not the only thing that can contain phytoestrogens, we know that things like vegetables, for example, broccoli, cauliflower, fruits, grains, as well as other plant sources can also contain phytoestrogens. The biggest thing though is that soy tends to contain the highest amount or one of the highest amounts of estrogens per serving. And so that's where the concern comes in because of this idea that if it's estrogen, and we know that high amounts of estrogen could potentially be increasing our breast cancer risk, that even phytoestrogens could be doing the same thing. The research has been showing us that this is actually not true, that phytoestrogens actually act completely different than our own hormonal type of estrogens that our body produces. So let's get started by talking about 3 things that you may have heard about that's actually not correct. So the first thing is that soy may actually increase risk for breast cancer or other estrogen-driven cancers and its recurrence as well. Studies have actually shown that the populations that consume the highest amounts of soy products actually have the lowest rates of breast cancer. Only when they start eating more like the Western style diet is when their risk for breast cancer also increases to match our own North American rates. The other interesting fact was that the recurrence rate was seen to be 26% or even up to 52% lower in those women who actually ate the highest amount of soy products versus the ones that actually ate the lowest amount of soy foods. What is interesting about this was particularly seen in postmenopausal women who had estrogen and progesterone positive breast cancers, but we also see soy products actually being beneficial for even women who have triple negative type of breast cancers as well. The second thing you may have heard that's also incorrect is that it could potentially interfere with breast cancer hormone therapies. Again, the idea being that phytoestrogens may act like estrogens in the body, and so that's where the concern would lie. Research is actually showing us that soy actually doesn't interfere with hormone therapies like tamoxifen or anastrozole. We know that those two actually work a little bit differently. Tamoxifen works on the receptors to block them, whereas anastrozole would work on the actual estrogen production and reduce estrogen levels in your system as well. We do know through research that soy actually doesn't seem to interfere with either of those two actions. Soy was, however, seen to potentially boost the effects of tamoxifen, for example. In one particular study, soy was actually shown to potentially boost the way that tamoxifen works by reducing recurrence risk by as high as 60% for those women who were eating the highest amounts of soy products versus the ones that were eating the lowest amounts. This is actually really interesting because that actually means that what we eat potentially or what we do could actually help to boost the way that your hormone therapies work. There is a masterclass I have all around this. I'll link it on my descriptions below. Number 3, if you have a genetic predisposition or increase in risk for breast cancer because of things like a BRCA1 or BRCA2 mutation, you shouldn't eat soy. This is actually also incorrect. What we see in studies is that women who have a higher genetic predisposition for things like breast cancer too may also actually benefit from including soy in their diet. This thing called epigenetics, or the fact that something that you do or eat could potentially impact the way that your genes are turned on or off, is the idea behind why soy may be actually helpful. We think that soy could potentially help to turn off some genes that may be linked to increased breast cancer risk. This is why this whole idea around not having soy because you have a genetic predisposition looks to be actually false. In the last few years, we know that there has been a clear conclusion around this. Moderate consumption of soy is actually potentially harmless or even beneficial as we saw in some of these studies. Now, here are some tips that might help you if you're starting out to eat soy, or if you just like to try to include more into your diet. Number one, really focus on whole soy foods. These are where the studies actually came out from with all of those benefits. Things like tofu, tempeh, edamame, or soy milk, those are considered whole soy foods. We're not talking necessarily about supplementation or other formats that are more processed. We're talking about actual whole foods having an impact versus something else. The other thing would be to try and buy organic when possible. They do tend to be genetically modified and pesticides may be used, so trying to get the organic brand is actually a lot better for your health to help decrease those health impacts as well. Last tip, try and buy extra firm tofu, because if you're starting out, this is actually the most versatile format of tofu that you could have. It's really easy to fry up. It's really easy to crumble up and use it in different dishes. Soft tofu tends to be better for things like soups, for example, like miso soups. And so if you're just starting out, look for the extra firm tofu, not just the firm tofu, and that will be a lot easier to use. It can also be marinated with a lot of different sauces, and it usually takes up a lot of those flavorings. If you don't like one particular tofu, you've tried a brand, just know that different brands actually have a slightly different flavor, so don't give up if you are trying to look for something that you like. And obviously also if you don't like it, that's totally okay. But at least we know that the research is showing us that moderate consumption, again, can be completely harmless and safe if you'd like to include it in your diet, and potentially could be helpful in many different ways. I hope that was helpful to you. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get notified when the next videos are up, and I'll see you next time.